All right, excited for this one. Everyone knows that I have a thing for tents and shelters. I'm a big fan of them. I use a bunch of them, and this company's kind of been making waves the last couple of years in the Florida shelter um, market. And I've got the owner, Brad Brooks from Argali, here today. So, Brad, how you doing?
Good, man. Drew, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we literally just met 10 minutes ago, and we had to just press record because we were going to record a whole podcast off air if we didn't press record sooner than later. I have a feeling me and Brad are going to get along real well.
Yeah, man. It's super nice to meet you. Yeah, familiar with your products, familiar with your brand, but it's like so many things in life. There's just like you see and hear things, but you're just so mired in your own world that you don't
Mhm.
oftentimes get a chance to meet everybody you want to. So yeah, it's nice to get a chance to meet you.
Yeah, and I mean, Argali's been around. How long has Argali been around for?
We it depends on which form you consider us to have started. I'd say technically since 2017 because we were a filmmaking company first. So we got to start making content
Really?
and then transition to making gear right about that same time. So let's just call it 2017.
2017, and you guys make some of the best game bags on the planet, correct? That's kind of put you on the
I
map.
I think there may be some people that have different opinions, but I believe we make a great game bag product. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I never hear bad things about Argali game bags. You guys started making the game bags, and it's neat that you guys do the content stuff. The content is something that I struggle with. So this year, I'm actually I have a producer for this podcast because I don't like to do it, and I have a producer for my vlogs and my videos, so I can get the content to them, and they're making my videos for me. Because when I try and edit my own videos, it looks like I tried to edit my own videos. Let's put it that way;
Yeah.
they don't look good.
Yeah.
And then I'm actually going to bring either pay or bring. I'm paying for someone every time. Pay a film company or bring a filmer on every one of my hunts this year with me to film because I find it's really hard for me to hunt and enjoy it and film at the same time.
Correct. Yes. There's a real juxtaposition that goes on there. We when we started out making films, though, we had a very specific thing we were trying to do, which is perhaps why there was some marginal interest in our brand at the time. Actually, that's not true. When we first started making films, there was no brand. We weren't trying to create a YouTube channel. We weren't trying to do anything other than tell a few specific stories. So when we got started, because I was really interested in telling stories about the value of wild places to hunting. So we were doing adventure style wilderness hunts. And when we first got started, like there wasn't a lot of content that I felt like I really related to.
What year is
Meteor was
this?
around. What's that?
What year is this?
So we actually filmed our first film in 2015 or 2016,
Okay.
and Meat was around, but most of the hunting media at that point in time was on TV. There was YouTube,
Jim Shockey stuff.
yeah, good stuff. But there was also a lot of, if I can say this, a lot of like just like shoot 'em up, like look,
Yep.
it's all about just like it's like a kill shot highlight reel. And at the time, it's just like, man, that's not what's interesting to me about
Mhm.
hunting. I love shooting big shit like everybody else, but to me it's like it's like that adventure part of the hunt was really what we
Yep.
were trying to show. I say that in today's day and age, and here we are in June 2024, like there's a lot of people doing that, but at the time there wasn't a lot of it. And so that was really our focus, is just on trying to tell some stories that were different, in some way, shape, or form. And that's really kind of how we got our start, but there was never an intent to make that a company. Like that wasn't the goal. It wasn't like, hey, we want to start a YouTube hunting channel. Not like, might not make sense, but that was not our goal. We simply wanted to make, like, we had one film we were going to make and we were done with that. There was no plan after that. It was just this one thing. And then we're like, let's do that again. That was kind of fun. There was some interest in that. Let's make one more film.
Mhm.
And after that, it was like, okay, maybe we should start a brand, associated with. But so when it comes to like our content, it has never been about, we should just film this, because it's always been like we've only done things that are interesting to us or to me, right? So it's like, what is this an interesting story worth telling or not? Am I excited about the story that we could tell through this? hunt. But the reality is too, man, like it's pretty annoying to film your hunts. Um,
Mhm.
and there are so many a year that
Very.
don't we don't film because there are times where I just want to go hunting and I don't want to have to deal with all
Hmm.
the logistics of filming it. I enjoy it sometimes, but I don't enjoy it all the time. And so you kind of have, I feel like you have to pick and choose when you do and don't take a film crew. And honestly, one of the best hunts I have this year, we're not going to film. So, in terms of the best tags I have, and that's just because I want to go just hunt and not have to worry about filming it.
Yeah. I guess I can see myself because I really enjoy the adventure more than hunting. I can really care less about killing things anymore.
Hmm.
I can see myself like I don't not like the filming. Like I can imagine if I didn't have a tag and I wasn't guiding my kids, I would like kind of enjoy the filming side of it, right? I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of times either I'm the tag holder or majority of the time my kids are the tag holder. So I'm kind of like still the hunter, right? In that sense. So it's hard to kind of get both those things and get it set up right. Um, it's hard to like, I guess you're kind of like self filming at that point and like to set up and I just want to hunt, you know,
Yeah,
but,
yeah. And I've done a lot of like self-filmed archery hunts.
oh man.
That is hard. I've done a few self-filmed archery mule deer hunts. Um, it's hard enough to kill a mule deer with your bow, and then when you just add in filming the whole thing, like it was fun when I first started doing it because it was like another challenge. It was like, oh, this makes everything so much harder, and that was kind of enjoyable because it was just like a new challenge. Um, I don't enjoy self-filming archery hunts anymore. I've done it, and I'm like, I think it's just not something I enjoy anymore. But I do enjoy filming things that are interesting to me. Um, and we've been working on in fact, we've been working on a big film project last year called Runout, which is our big. We haven't done like a feature film in a while, and this is a story that it's actually going to go live on the internet later this week. Um, and this is just a film that's a little bit more about like my life and things outside of hunting that I do, and sort of winds them together in different ways. And it's also about me trying to kill a big mule deer with my bow. But those are the kinds of things like when you find a project that like interests you, like I enjoy filming that part of it.
Gotcha.
But if it gets to feel like, for me anyway, just like I'm doing it just to do it, then I'm like, we're not. I don't want to film this.
Yeah, I like what you said about storytelling and like that's what I lack. I lack the ability to tell a story through video. And I'm friends with Luke Dusenberry. We actually have him working for us now to get pictures for us and you know content every month. Um, Luke can tell a story through a film,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I kind of just show you a bunch of clips through a film, right? Does that
Yeah.
make sense? And like, there's an art to this, right? To be able to have something to be able to show the pain, to be able to show the emotions, and have it all work together. And not only that, to do it in like whatever the typical 15 to 20-minute film is, right? When you're doing a 10-day hunt and find all that content and get it and be able to do that in that time frame.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
definitely
just
a skill.
think about like what you like watching on the internet, right? Or what you like watching on like Netflix or whatever. It's like, what interests you? It's like, well, I like interesting stories by interesting people. Like most of the
Mhm,
time, we're interested in people. We're interested in like, we're not interested in like ego driven, watch what I can do. I'm better than everybody else kind of
mhm,
like, content. Like nobody really cares, right? So
mhm,
that's the thing that I think a lot of like Luke. I know Luke a little bit, and he's a super talented guy. And I think the art of making a film is like figuring out like what is this going to make this interesting at like a base level. What is that? And thinking that through and being like humble about it and telling like honest, open stories that people can connect to and relate to. I think that's what we all want, right? It's the
mhm.
best things you've ever watched. I mean, just in like film world, or like the things that just are really well told. Um, that help maybe give you a different perspective on some angle of society. And I don't think hunt films should be any different than that.
Yeah, for sure. I have to check some of yours out. Like right now, I would say like if I had to pick my favorite films right now, it's gonna be Go Hunt, Stone Glacier, and Gritty. I like the stuff that Stone Glacier does as well. Um, so I'll have to check your stuff out. I mean, it sounds kind of like right up my alley for that, you know, the storytelling thing. I'm not a big fan of like kill shot, kill shot, kill shot,
Yeah.
16 different ways. You know what I mean? It's just I like a story. I like to watch it. Like I know what I want, like in a film. I just don't know how to make it myself. But
Yeah, yeah.
I'm actually probably going to we'll put together some real films this year as well, just like the 15-minute films. But I might actually turn some of these hunts into like vlogs as well, because that's kind of like more my style. That's I'm gonna do that. I don't really see anybody doing that either. So like kind of like do have the long form hunt and then also have like some vlog videos. I don't know what you think about that, but I don't really see anybody doing that. And turning some of my hunts into vlogs.
I think if you figure out a way to make it interesting, it could be great. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
mean, I think it's just truly like the thing about just content in general is again, it's like if you can, it's a big world out there,
mhm.
and whenever I do talk to people who are interested in getting into content, who are maybe new at it, it's like just like I just tell people just like do what you think is interesting, and don't I'm not saying you're not suggesting this, but I think there is a tendency for people to want to sort of like copy a style of other folks or
Mhm.
do what other people are doing, and that's fine too. But I think everybody has like an interesting, if you're like honest with yourself about like what do I like, what's interesting to me, and then what's my take on it, or what do I want to do, you can create something that is of interest that other people will find interesting as well because it's interesting to you. And so just do that, follow your own path. So I'm sure, man, you can make a great like vlog style film or film series too.
Yeah, I'm gonna mess with it and do it. Another thing I struggle with is man, carrying the camera around. I kind of feel like a dork.
Yeah.
Right, like walking into it. We walked into a talk. We did a video the other day on like a tree saddle. We went and shot bows together, and then went to get Mexican food down here, the best Mexican food in the world, San Diego. And
Yeah.
then we were going to the mountains to learn how to use a tree saddle. Right, so I'm like walk in. I'm like I feel like I got my GoPro in my pocket. I'm like kind of pulling it out like real low. Like I don't want to like hold this thing up. And I need to just get over that. Right, like you just need to get it out, film, and do
Yeah.
it. And then like some of my cameras, like I have like I just got like a $1,600 lens. It's like a 20 to 400 lens for my Nikon. I love it. Now I got this big camera. It's a little bit like bring that into a place. It looks like a professional rig, with I got the cage on it. I got the handles, like the
Uh-huh.
mic. It's just I don't know. It could be. It's almost. Just need to get over it and just do it. So when I do
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stuff for the vlogging,
Get
but yeah,
self.
the content thing is like content is king, man, and it's hard to do. Um, cool. So what is that like? Is it like YouTube's Argali or what?
Yeah, yeah. We just have our own YouTube channel, just Argali, our own YouTube channel. I'll send you after I get off this podcast. I'll send you a link to some of our films that maybe seem to have the most interest. We did the film that we made that has the most views right now is a film we did called The Last Wild Place. So I did a film series called The Last Wild Places. This was the first film that we did in that series, and the whole intent of that film series was to film adventure style hunts in some of the wildest places left in America. And the one we did on the Middle Fork of the Salmon in Idaho, we did like a late season
Hmm.
November raft float trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon. For people that aren't familiar with it, it's the Central Idaho wilderness. It's the biggest wilderness in the lower 48. So there's two big wilderness areas that form a little over 3 million acres of land. And then the Middle Fork of the Salmon kind of runs through the middle of it. You can fly in and get dropped off
Hmm.
there.
Which is what I did.
What's that?
I did that.
You've done that trip?
I flew into the church. Yeah.
Awesome. So you understand it's a
Yes.
magical place.
It's a magical. I want to go back so bad.
Yeah, it's a magical place. It's one of the few times I've ever told people where we're at when we're when we're hunting. It comes at a bit of a cost, right? I mean, I also believe that like if you care about keeping places, as much as you can as they are, you have to have a constituency of people that actually care about those places. And so yeah, that was kind of the if you've been there, I think the film will probably have a little bit more resonance for you. Um, yeah. So, anyways, I'll send you a link after we get off this. But yeah, it's all on our YouTube
Yep.
channel.
Yeah, I would say like you know how you have like the poor man's sheep, which is like the odd ads.
Hmm.
I would say that the Frank Church is like the poor man's Alaska. Like you could get up like there's a wilderness down here that you can get to that's not as logistically hard as I shouldn't call it poor man's, but like it's a lot. It's like a great entry into fly-in hunts, a great entry into remote wilderness hunts. You know, if you can't make it to Alaska, it's a lot easier to get to.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. The hunting is a lot harder than Alaska. We'll
a
say
lot
that's
harder.
true.
I thought I was gonna be like, we're gonna see so many animals, dude. We struggle. We end up killing 2 deer and a bull, but it was like the only 2 deer and the only bull that we saw for 8 days. So
It's not a particularly great
yeah,
place for like animal densities. It's just not. Doesn't have the genetics or the habitats, but it's so big. I mean, you're
mhm,
going for the experience, and you're going to
yeah,
you know, experience that just giant wild country. But it's rugged, man.
yeah,
I think I've seen that country eat people up. It's so big, and it's hard to you can't fathom how big it is until you're in it. Um, and but I've definitely seen a lot of people um, get eaten up by that country.
dude. My buddy shot a bull 8 miles from the strip.
That's a long
It,
ways.
it
Yeah.
in that country. It
Mhm.
My body will never be the same.
Yeah.
This is the worst pack of my life. But like one thing I learned about that, like, is we thought like you're gonna fly in, you gotta hike in like so far, but it's like once you fly in, like you pretty much can hunt off the airstrip. Like it's remote everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
It
it's
is.
not like you
Yeah.
really don't have to go 10 miles. If I did it again, I would probably do a better base camp and like more of a spike camp style. Like have enough in my pack for 1 or 2 days out.
Hmm.
Rather than like we put on 70 pounds on our backs and like took the whole camp way back in there. Um, and you don't you one thing we learned is like there's animals like we ended up shooting a deer like right by the airstrip. You know what I mean? I didn't
Yeah.
see a
Yeah.
deer. I was back.
Yeah. I think there is just a misconception in general that like you have to go like further than everybody.
Hmm.
I love backpack hunting and I do a lot of it. And I do like to hike like really far. Mostly though, I do that just to get away from other people, not because the hunting is better.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so that's I think that's true inside and outside of the of the Frank. But yeah, it's a long ways. I think the most brutal pack out I've ever seen or been a part of, and I played a small role in this. Is my we were 11 miles from an airstrip on a spiked out, and my buddy we were on a deer hunt, but my buddy had a elk tag, and I
Hmm.
had a conversation with him. I'm like, don't shoot an elk back here. For the love of
I
God,
had
don't.
the same conversation.
Yeah, and I said because you're gonna. He's a good friend, so I said you're gonna ruin both of our hunts because we're gonna spend the entire time packing out your elk, and I'm not gonna not help you. He goes, no, 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 no. If I shoot an elk, I'm gonna do it by myself.
No way.
What does he do? Second day, shoots a really big bull, 11 miles from the airstrip, like 5,000 vertical feet one way. Not exaggerating. And he packed it. He packed like he shot it. I saw him back at camp that night. He's like, shot an elk. I was like, well, I'm happy for you. But also, what are you thinking? We talked about this. And he's like, well, don't worry about it. I'm going to pack it out myself. I'm not even worried about shooting a deer. I've got, 6 days to pack this thing out. Like, it'll be fine. And so he could do one trip a day. It was 22 miles round trip. And he did four trips in 4 days to pack out his elk. Um, and luckily it was plenty cold, so it wasn't going to spoil or anything. But yeah, he packed it all out, made his hips bleed. Like I've got a picture to this day. He ended up duct taping his hips because his hip belt was making his hips bleed so bad. And that was like halfway through packing like his second trip, his hips started bleeding. And so then he just like he's a tough dude, put some duct tape over his hips and just kept going and never complained once. He's a tough dude. So, anyways,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't regret him shooting that bull. It did like we talked about it. I'm like, what's like 2 miles? Like, nope, killed the first bull. I said never killed a bull before. And he killed him, man. It was really cool. We
that's
packed it
cool.
out. It definitely did like change the dynamic of the hunt because like we did it in 2 days, right? So
Mhm.
a couple trips. But you're just after doing that, your just body is just worked.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty funny. So we killed the bull, and he's like, "All right, you're up." I'm like, "Okay, good, good." And so we wake up the next day. We wake up at like 11 a.m. because we got back to camp at like 1 a.m. in the morning, right? And I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna hike up this canyon up here. We're gonna go back this different area." And we get going back. We're like a mile or two back, and he's like, "I can't." He's like, "I can't help. I can't go with you. I can't physically. I cannot move. I can't. I'm sorry. I can't do this. I'm gonna have to go lay down next to the river and just lay down there for the afternoon and just relax. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going. Like, I want to kill something, right? So he goes, and then sure enough, dude, he's walking to the river, and a buck stands up right next to like the trail by the airstrip, and he shoots the buck.
Sure.
And he not Onyx. We're back there. We're using our Garmin's, and he in reaches me. He's like, "I'm so sorry, dude." So then I have to hike down, like I'm like 3 miles back, hike down 3 miles. We get his deer packed up. I had to pack his deer out 2 times to get his deer back to camp. It
Classic.
was it was pretty good, man. So I
Yeah.
didn't kill anything on that hunt, but I'd go back 100 times and not kill anything. I was
Oh
just
yeah.
it was one of those things where we split the meat. It was like, when on a hunt like that, typically we'll just say like, hey,
Sure.
we're gonna split the meat, or we're a team. We're in it together. You kill something, we're in it together, and that's how we do it.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting two. It was pretty funny. He's that just
Yeah.
literally just read, "I'm sorry." That's all he said.
Yeah. Classic. That's awesome.
So yeah, it was a good time, dude. So Argali is a type of sheep, correct?
Correct.
How'd you come up with that?
It's dude. It's there's really nothing romantic about it. I just like the symbolism of sheep. We're a lightweight hunting gear company, so I was like, our golly sheep. They sort of epitomize everything that there our ethos as a brand. So that's really all there is to it. And there's just something about sheep that I think is hardwired into the human brain. Like when you see a sheep skull, I don't care who you are. If you're a hunter or non-hunter, you look at it and you're like, that's cool. And you don't know why, but there's something about it that's just like you like. Um, but particularly as hunters, there's sheep are just an iconic symbol. So it's just like the symbolism, and then I like the name.
Yeah, it's
So
unique.
yeah,
Yeah, it kind of fits my mold. If you're like, why do you need to become a Tricer? I'm like, I don't know, because I was trying to figure it out, and I was like, I've told the story a bunch of times on the podcast now, but I was like, I don't know, I need like a dumb name, like like Kafaru, Sitka, uh, Kuyu, or Golly, like it's like a random, not I'm not dumb, but like something unique, right? Like
yeah, I know what you
u-
mean.
unique. And I'm like, okay, like tripods, triceratops, tracer. And that's it. Like that's it. But I wanted a unique because like your guys' names. I wanted like a unique name because I don't
Mhm.
want to be like the hunting company, the hunting
Yeah.
tripods. Like I like a unique name. I like Argali. It's unique to you. And like I when I hear Argali, I see your logo and I instantly know like what you do. And plus, you've done really good at branding your stuff. Like your brand is on like your game bags. Um,
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that.
so you've been really good at that. So like, yeah, I like the name. It's unique. Have you killed one yet?
No, 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 I haven't. I don't know if I ever will or not. I'm going on. I was telling you earlier, I'm going on my first sheep hunt ever this year. I'm going on a doll sheep hunt.
Hmm.
I would love to kill an Argali ram at some point.
Where are they at? Are they in like Tajikistan or whatever?
Tajikistan, I think some in Afghanistan. They're in the stands of the world. And I know a few people who've been on those hunts, and it sounds incredible. It's a very expensive hunt. Um, and yeah, I don't know why I have this idea that I don't like doing hunts where it feels like my hand is being held and somebody just takes you
Yeah,
an animal is like there it is, bud.
very similar feeling to you.
Yeah, that's not what I like to do. And I might have a misperception of what it would be like to do that. I probably do. There's a lot I don't know. I'm ignorant on it, but those types of hunts I just don't have any interest in. I've only
Hmm.
ever been on one guided hunt in my
Hmm.
life, and that was last year, and that's because I had to. I hunted mule deer up in Canada, and you have to have a guide, and it was great. My friend Ryan Harder's a guide up there, and it was just like hunting with a buddy. And in Alaska, you have to have a guide for sheep as a non-resident, so I have to have a guide, and I'm looking forward to it. Outfit I'm going with, they're great, and so, but just generally, I don't like to be guided. I like to part of the challenge and fun of hunting for me is just getting dumped into a situation where you have to figure it out and learn, and that's when you kind of put your skills to the test and be like, new species, new place, can you figure it out? And that's
Yeah, I'm
fun.
very similar. Like I would rather go hunt small black-tailed deer or mule deer than go on a guided hunt. Like I'd rather, I have no. I'm not saying that I won't go to Africa at some point, but like I really it doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, same.
Going to Africa and just plucking a bunch of animals, like it just doesn't appeal to me. versus like I would much rather go to the Frank Church
Hmm.
and just bust my hump for 10 days trying to find a mule deer,
Yeah.
right? Much more than going to stacking up a pile of animals, right? It's not my thing. I like the adventure side of it, and just that, And I'm not saying guides aren't good. I think guides are phenomenal. I think they're great. I probably would benefit from a guide on a lot of hunts, but like
Yeah.
mostly I just want to figure it out, right? Like I want to get in there and figure it out and try and find it. And I'm happy with shooting a smaller deer or elk and getting it done on my own than I am going with a guide.
Yeah. 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 And I have lots of guide friends, and like they provide a service that's really
Yeah.
valuable for a lot of folks. It's just not my preferred thing to do. And at Western Hunt Expo, I got into a bit of I wouldn't call it an argument, but we, we had a discussion where I'm really interested in killing some of the animals in Africa, but I only want to do it spot and stock style with my bow.
Yeah.
And this one guy that I talked to, he came over to our booth and we were talking. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I was like, do you do archery hunts? He's like, yes. And I said, do you do spot and stock? And he goes, oh, no, you don't do that. That's not how we do it in Africa. And I was like, well, I know people who've done it like that. And he's like, no, 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 that's not how you do it. Like we put you in a blind and you shoot them over water. And I
Hmm.
was like, I'm not interested in doing that. I would only like, I'm only interested if we can do spot and stock. And he goes, no, we can't do that. And he's like, you'll have so much fun out of a blind. And I'm like, I'm not going to have fun out of hunting out of a blind. Like
Hmm.
you're going back and forth. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Um, uh, but I know why they do it. It's a much more like controlled environment. People can shoot. I mean, it's like I get it, but I'm like that's just not what interests me. So that's when it comes to like the hunts I want to do, it's like I do the things that interest me or like
Hmm.
the style of hunting I like to do, and
Hmm.
for sure the like adventure style hunting is my jam. Just new things, new
Yeah.
places, and having to figure it out.
Yeah. I think if I go, like, I have an open invite to go over there. Um, if I go, it'll probably be just with my bow and just, I don't know. I got to see if they'll let me spot and stock and do that stuff. Like, it just doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't, man. I don't know what it is. Like, it doesn't. And plus, like, I don't want a bunch of African euros around my house. I don't, I don't know, man. It just doesn't appeal to me. Like, I
Yeah,
don't want the big old rugs. I know people love it, and you get the big sable, and you do all that stuff, and I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me.
yeah,
You know, I don't know. But so, man, that's cool. You guys did the game bags, did that stuff, and then a couple of years ago, you guys kind of like dove headfirst into the I want to say tents. Or you call them tents or shelters? Shelter market,
tents.
shelters.
Yeah, I call them tents. Yeah,
You call them tents?
yeah, yeah. Most we use the words interchangeably, but most people have no. When we say shelter, when I say shelter, I have to remind myself that most people don't know what I'm talking about. That we're really
Gotcha.
talking about a tent. So yeah, I say tents and shelters, but I'm trying to get better at just saying tent.
Yeah, I had Ryan on from Seek Outside, and he's like, "No, we call them shelters." And I'm like, I get why you do that, right? Because it's not necessarily a tent; it's like a different thing. Like, some of the stuff you're coming out with is pretty sick. But I think tent's a more universal thing. But I don't know. Maybe it's just because like it's a floorless. For some reason, people want to call floorless tents shelters, but they want to call tents tents, right? Like if I go get
Yeah,
a
yeah,
Kuyu Nights, whatever this star tent, I have one of those. That's a tent. It's not a shelter.
tents.
you
Yeah.
know.
Well, like when you think about it this way, when you're doing your own research on tents, like you're probably not typing into Google, uh, what are the best backcountry shelters? You're probably typing in tent.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, when you kind of think shelter, you kind of think like you're on that show alone and you're making like a wood
Exactly.
hut. You know what I mean?
Making a lean-to. Yeah.
But I've been trying to say shelter more because I feel like
Yeah.
it's like the cool thing to say.
Yeah, and I'll just I don't know if this is what you're asking, but I have always, I mean, obviously, like tents are something that we all use, and something that I, like you, I've always been very interested and picky about my tents. And one of the things that always frustrated me about a lot of the tents I have used in the past is just like the sag of the tent when it gets wet. So like nylon based
Mhm.
fabrics sag when they get wet, and it was such an annoyance to me that I was like, why is everybody using nylon based fabric for tents? When in the ultralight backpacking world, there are lots of companies who have been moving away from nylon and towards like polyester and or Dyneema based shelters. And so that really that was what, from being honest, what like led me on the journey to just want to make our own tents. I also am I'm fairly particular about when I'm setting up a tent. I want it to be quick and fast and efficient. I don't like futzing around with having to get the shape of my tent right or the pitch right. I
Hmm.
want it to be relatively intuitive and easy. Um, and so that's really what started us down the path of wanting to make our own tents. And we launched our 2-person tent, which is our Rincon, and our 4-person tent, our Absaroka, were the first 2 tents we launched. And those response to those was really great out of the box. But I think that as a new product category for us, the test of whether or not people are really responding to our product isn't the first year; it's the subsequent years. I think you're going to get a lot of early adopters, people that like maybe some of our other products who are willing to try them out.
Hmm.
But whether or not people keep looking for them or keep buying them over time is really the test of whether or not they're gaining a reputation or whether or not we're being taken seriously as a company who makes really high end, high quality tents. And that's luckily for us, it's continued to do really well for us. And we have 1-person, 6-person, 8-person. Our 1-person tent actually, we haven't really talked about this, but it won Backpacker Outside magazines, like one of the top, I can't remember what it was, like 5 backpacking tents of the year for 2024, which for us is like a small hunting company. Being in the room with the backpacking tent companies was like a fairly significant recognition for us, or at least it was for me. I'll just speak for myself. It's like here we are, this small hunting brand, and we're like elbowing our way into the room with a bunch of traditional backpack tent companies.
So are your tents sil poly then, not sil nylon?
Still poly, all of them are still poly. Yeah,
Also poly. So do you have to store them hung up then?
no, no,
You don't.
Why do you ask that?
I just thought for some reason that if they were so poly, you had to keep them like more when you store them, you just store them like kind of like a sleeping bag.
No, no, not at all.
Okay.
No, I read a long article on this. So most of the and I don't say this in like a disparaging way against anybody, like right, as like a company, like you kind of make your choices about what you use for various reasons. So I'll just tell you like why we use Sil Poly. Um, when tent fabrics were back in the heyday, so when backpacking first became a thing and people were interested in backpacking, the early backpacking companies were tent companies were all making nylon based tents because in the lightweight fabric world, the waterproof fabric world, the best the best durability and waterproof fabrics you could get at a lightweight were made out of nylon, and the polyester based fabrics were just inferior. They weren't very durable, tore easily, and so what you had was sort of a self fulfilling cycle of, well, there's a lot of interest in these tent companies in buying lightweight nylon tent fabrics, and so a lot of the R&D from the fabric companies went into making better nylon fabrics. But over the years, the technology for making polyester based tents and tent fabrics has caught up to nylon based fabrics. So I think if you're a traditional like old school backpacker, the idea that a polyester fabric could be as like tough and durable as a nylon fabric is something that's really hard to mentally wrap your head around.
That's my conception.
It's a misconception, but for a long
Okay.
time it was true. But things have changed. Times have changed. It's 2024 now, right? So when we did our own like independent uh, research, so you can take, not all tent fabrics are created equally, right? So like if you get a high quality 20 denier nylon fabric and a high quality 20 denier polyester based fabric, and you do the exact same waterproof treatment on the fabric, and then you test for tear resistance and abrasion resistance, the two are dang near identical. A nylon fabric will be slightly more durable for tear strength out of the box. But what happens with nylon is that it can absorb water vapor. So water, and that's what causes tent sag. So water vapor actually gets through the waterproof coating, gets into the actual fabric of the fiber, causes it to sag. When that happens, nylon actually loses a lot of tear strength. Whereas polyester is naturally hydrophobic. So polyester, that's why polyester doesn't sag. So if you have like hunting clothing made out of polyester, so like Kuiu, a lot of Sitka, like they use a polyester based fabric for their pants. the advantage of that is that it doesn't absorb water, so you don't your pants won't just like swell up and expand when they get wet nearly as much as a nylon based fabric will. Same thing with tent fabrics, polyester fabrics, and I'm like geeking out hard in here, Drew. So like bear
No,
with
I
me.
like it because like I mean I have a nylon tent or a nylon tent set up in my yard right now that sagged last night because of the condensation. So
Yeah,
this relates to me because
it's
I'm seam sealing a tent right now. So I got it most of it done last night. Ran out of seam sealing because I don't know why they didn't give you like 63 tubes. This tent's big. So I got some more seam sealing this morning. My kids have their sealing it right now, finishing it. But this morning it sagged a little bit.
Yeah, and that's normal, and it's you lose a lot of interior space. People who, if you haven't used like a single pole or double pole shelter, doesn't have like tent poles that sort of arch around it to
Yep.
keep the structure. Tent sag is a big deal because you lose a lot of the interior. You can lose a lot of the interior space of your tent. So, anyways, back to the tent fabrics though. But polyester is naturally hydrophobic, so it can't absorb water. It actually, and it has much better UV resistance. So, you think about like in a real world situation when your tent is likely to fail. It's when it's like windy and wet out, right? So you get a big storm comes in, your tent gets really wet, and the wind's whipping. Well, now that your nylon based fabric is going to be weaker than a comparable polyester based fabric. If you had like did a side by side comparison, because the polyester fabric doesn't absorb water, the nylon fabric when it absorbs water it gets weaker. Um, so when I was doing my research, I'm like, why does nobody use polyester? I don't get it. Like I don't understand why. But really, what it comes down to is like misconceptions and just like this is the way we've always done it. We're used to nylon, and that's why we use it. But if you look at like in the ultralight backpacking world, you're seeing a lot of companies that have been around for a while, like Tarp Tent, who have been switching from nylon to polyester based tent fabrics because of the whole like tent sag effect, and because the technology is caught up. And so that was a big part of what I was like, you don't have to have tent sag. You don't have to deal with that in your tent. You can have like a good polyester based fabric that functionally it's the exact same, right? So you can get the same weight as a 20 denier poly and a 20 denier nylon, same weight. There's no difference in functionally how they perform, stretch, how you pitch them, anything. It's just a different fabric. You'll just notice as a user that you're not going to get the same level of sag, and that really matters on bigger tents too. So the bigger your tent, the more sag you're going to get.
Yeah, the longer the walls. So what I was thinking of was Dyneema. Dyneema will you need to be stored hanging like a sleeping bag, from
Um,
my understanding.
no, it should be fine.
Crushed
We're
up? Am
actually
I tripping?
well, you know what? If that is the case, there's a lot I don't know, Drew. So you may know something I don't.
I
But
think the Dyneema you have to store because it'll it's more brittle and it'll crinkle up kind of. You need to store it open,
open,
uh,
huh? Okay,
like a sleeping bag. Hang it in the closet.
yeah,
So that's neat. They're doing the Sil Poly stuff, and then do all of your shelters come with a stove jack?
yes, except for all of them except for the one person.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a removable stove jack on our 2 and 4 person tents, and then
Removable meaning you just put like a Velcro piece on the outside of a different kind or
it
inside?
has so the reason we do that. So yeah, basically there are where the stove jack there's a U shape piece
Uh-huh.
for the stove jack, and over that there's actually two zippers in there. There's one that zips in the stove jack, and on top of that there's just a piece of tent fabric that zips. So if you're backpacking and you're not going to take a stove, you can zip out that stove jack and save yourself about 3 ounces. Um,
Okay.
so again, as a personally, like I am a minimalist, and so if I'm going to buy a tent, I like to have the option of cutting as much weight as I can, and I think I don't think any we have a patent pending design on that part of our tent. It's like if you buy a tent and you want to be able to use a stove, you have to have the stove jack built into the tent for everybody else.
Mhm.
And so, like, but if you're going on a backpack hunt and you don't want to take the stove jack because it's archery season, you're not going to take a stove, you still have to pack that stove jack around. It's surprisingly bulky and just adds a little bit of weight to your tent. So for our backpacking style tents, we made them removable.
Gotcha. And you do offer floor bathtubs for these things and nets, right? Correct?
Yeah,
Now?
so our system of tents, we call them modular setups. So all of our tents are kind of the same in terms of you can get a tent and you can get a half insert, a full insert, and half floors for pretty much all of our tents. So you can customize sort of the way in which you use the tent. So you can just buy, if you want to run a floorless setup, you can just buy the tent. If you want to run the floor, or excuse me, like a half floor, dedicated half floor and the tent, you can do that. If you want a full bathtub floor with mesh netting, that's what we call our insert. You can buy a half insert. So like half your tent is for sleeping, the other
Mhm.
half's for gear. If you want a full insert, you can buy, full bathtub floor and mesh netting. So you get the whole tent is sort of like a traditional double wall tent.
Mhm.
You can sort of mix and match the pieces that you take depending on where you're going and what the weather is going to be like. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the things that our customers really like about our tents is they're all kind of designed to be like modular. And so like if you buy a tent and the handful of pieces that go with it, you can be like, okay, I'm going to grab the tent and the half insert on this hunt, or this hunt I'm just taking the tent, depending on what you like and what your preferred way to camp is.
And with the insert with a double wall, that limits condensation a little bit too, correct?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. It helps mitigate condensation. The other thing that helps with that a lot, Drew, is just the way in which you pitch it too, right? So we have line lock adjusters in all our tents. So
Yeah,
if condensation is really bad, you pitch it higher elevation, allow better airflow. But condensation, especially late season, is just really it's annoying. I hate dealing with
it's
it.
the worst. The stove makes that nice, but
It does. Yeah.
it's just yeah. If you guys don't know, if you never use it, like a floorless shelter, they have like a bunch of perks. But like more, like my least favorite part about them is which that sag really comes into play is condensation because you might go to sleep with a sil nylon tent and condensation on it, and then you wake up in the morning and your sleeping bag is soaked because this thing is like now sagged onto your bag, depending
Hmm.
how close you are to the wall. So yeah, it's the double wall can help a little bit on that. But I guess if you're on a late season hunt, you're probably not bringing a double wall shelter. You're probably just running a stove anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you nailed you hit it right on the head. It's like when you have a saggy tent and a lot of condensation, that's when it really starts to get annoying because then it like you can touch the top of your sleeping
Dude,
bag.
you touch it with your arm and you just feel like something about it, especially when you're sleeping with somebody. I kind of feel gross. Like I feel like
Yeah,
I don't know why I feel like it's their spit, but it's like I just feel like
yeah,
you're just this whole tent's just covered in your breath. I mean, it's what it is, right? So it's
yeah,
just
yeah, pretty
it's
much.
crazy.
Yeah,
Um, so now I love floral shelters and I hate floor. I go back and forwards on them. I use them. I have a few of them now. I think three of them now. I use them on a lot of hunts. There are some downsides to them, like the being dirty, but I kind of that kind of like gets outweighed for me by being able to like cook inside my tent
yeah,
and be able to have everything on the floor in there. Honestly, when it's freezing out, I just dig a little hole, brush my teeth, and spit in the hole, and then cover the hole up inside the tent. Like I don't have to get out of the tent.
sure.
You know, there's just it's nice to be have that nice to be able to eat in there, not worry about getting it dirty. It's nice to be able to come in with your boots and not worry about getting mud. And so there's nothing worse than like being in a floored tent and just having it covered in mud.
Yeah, oh,
And
yeah,
so there's definitely some benefits there. What are you running for a ground cloth? Are you running Tyvek, or you guys have your
yeah.
own? What are you guys doing?
I run a sheet of Tyvek. Now, if I'm going to run, honestly, our half floors weigh as much as a piece of Tyvek. So, and it's just a little bit cleaner and easier to deal with. So I'll run our
Mhm,
half floor in our tent. But it's up until this year. I just ran a piece of Tyvek. I rarely take, I mean, I pretty much do floorless setup 95% of the time, maybe even more than that. The only time I really take any mosquito netting is if I'm in Alaska or I'm scouting in the summertime when mosquitoes are an issue. But everybody's a little unique and different in what they like. I have friends who are very avid backpack hunters who always take like a half insert typically. So that
mhm,
way you still get the benefits of the floorless shelter because you can walk into your tent or crawl
mhm.
into it with your boots on or cook inside there. But then you have like your sleeping areas kind of contained.
Yeah, I kind of find like one of the issues you have like with the floorless is sometimes like, even though you're on your ground cloth, like things will slide off of it, and it gets just
Yeah,
you just get dirty. But you get dirty no matter what on an 8 day
yeah,
hunt. Like you're gonna be filthy, you're gonna smell. So it's like you just get over it. You're gonna be dirty no matter what, how you cut it. Like if you guys ever get a chance to like if you're listening to this, like you get off of like a long backpack hunt, wash your pants in like your bathtub and you'll get a better understanding of how dirty you really were, over
Yeah.
your shirt. I actually try and on a lot of those hunts, I'll try and find a creek and I'll put rocks inside my pants and like like let water just run through them, so it kind of cleans them out. And if I have time in the middle of the day to let them clean out, use
That's
like
good.
nature's washing machine.
Yeah. I've always been a bit of a, uh, I'm just like, I just roll with the punches. I'm just like, I'm just filthy. I don't really care. Just roll with it. But I'm kind of I imagine I'm the exception.
Well, you just smell so bad too. Like when you're with your buddy, like I don't think you really realize how much you smell until you get back to the truck and you're in the car together. You're just like, oh my gosh, we smell so bad. And
Yeah.
then like if you're like me, like I have to go get like Carl's Jr. or something and walk in somewhere because I need to eat because I've been eating Mountain House for a week and all I want is like French fries and a Coke and a burger,
Yeah.
just smelling.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you guys make stoves as well? Do you guys
We
make your
do.
own stoves?
Yeah. Yep. We have our own titanium stove, our Skyline TI stove. Um, and again, I've used a lot of different stoves. So like when I was designing ours, we didn't invent the idea of collapsible titanium stoves. The first one I ever used, I actually don't know if this company's still around, was a titanium goat stove. Long, long time ago. And For our stove system, like ease of setup was really, really important to me.
Hmm.
Just like how easily the box, um,
So
the
just you a square style, not a circle one.
yeah, I'm not, again,
I
this is
don't,
personally,
circle
I'm
ones
not
are
a
not
fan.
easy.
What's that?
I feel like the circle ones are not easy. Like
They're
the
not
round ones.
easy. You also, so when I do late season backpack hunts, I don't take a jet boil. I use my wood stove I just bring a
Really?
titanium cup, and that's all I use to heat up water for my meals and everything. Um, I have had, that's actually what I do, and I've been doing it for a while. But it's funny. I have been confronted in the backcountry by people who, like this happened last year twice. I had guys because I talked about this in a video we did, and I had two guys who did. There's like I ran into them on a hunt where I didn't have a jet boil with me, and they're like, "I don't believe you actually do that. Can I see what's in your pack?" And I had my backpack on. I was like, "I don't know what you think. I'm lying to you about this." I was like, "Sure. See if you can find a jet boil in here. Go for it."
That's
Um,
crazy.
so like a box stove that has a flat top is really important because you can use it.
Yeah.
So the cylinder stoves are, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, like they're finicky to put together, and you kind of lose a little bit of functionality compared to a box style stove. We cook meat on box style stoves, heat up water on box style stoves. You can melt snow on box style stoves, like so
Mhm.
much easier. Like we have, we'll put, if I'm three guys in a tent in one of our 6-person tents, like all three of us are going to be heating up water in the morning for coffee and breakfast on the top of the stove. And I don't know how you would do that on a cylinder stove.
Yeah.
And in order to heat up that water fast, you need your cup to be sitting on the
Right by
stove.
the
So
right by
I
the.
think it's more functional.
So are you just bringing like a 20-ounce titanium cup, or what are you bringing?
No, no, just like a 10-ounce titanium cup.
10-ounce titanium cup.
Yeah, that's it. Just a titanium cup. Yeah, you just pour some water in there. It doesn't take that much longer. You just get up a little earlier in the morning, build a fire. It forces you to build a fire in the morning. Um,
Mhm.
I've only had one situation, not this last fall, the fall before, where we had it was a late November hunt and it got real cold and our chimney actually collapsed. We had like crazy, crazy, crazy high winds and it actually bent our chimney in half. So then we couldn't have a fire. We had to get out there in the middle of the night and like that was like 50, 60-mile-an-hour winds. Like trees were getting knocked down everywhere. We were in a burn. It was wild. It was a wild
Dude, I have a
experience.
similar story. I'll tell it when you're done.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, so like I like to sit the box style stoves. There are no rods that go through our stoves, so it's all kind of quick
Really?
connect parts. And then I'd say like the other thing that's sort of unique about our stoves and one way we were able to build them without and save quite a bit of weight is the leg system. So our truss lock leg system, we just have a wireframe leg system that folds up on the bottom side of the stove and then folds out. So when most of the titanium stoves out there, the leg system, they actually use like steel all thread
Hmm.
rods,
I
and so
have two of them. They do that same thing.
what's that?
I have two of them. They use that.
Yeah, and to me that sort of negates the whole purpose of having this titanium. You're paying a premium for a titanium stove, and then you add sort of heavy, stainless steel all thread, and it adds just a lot of weight to your stove. So we don't have any of that. The wireframe system on our stove allows it just to save quite a bit of weight when you compare like apples to apples on like volume of the stoves. So
And is everything else like clipping together then? Like with like
no, so we do have
snaps?
so on the inside of our stoves we have titanium L brackets with a female threaded
With
end on
oh,
the
with
top of
nut
the L
certs in them?
bracket.
Okay.
Yep. So you set the top of the stove in, and then you just thread in a couple 4 screws on top.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a nut cert. I came from the sheet metal industry. I just left, so
Okay.
I'm very familiar with all this stuff.
Yep.
Like I see
Yep.
these titanium stoves, and like, I can make these things all day long.
Yeah. They're spot. They're not complicated
Mhm.
things. But how they assemble, anyways, so how they assemble and the engineering on the legs is actually quite complicated. That took us a long time to get right.
Mhm.
Seems simple, not simple. And you know this if you came from the sheet metal industry. It's like sometimes getting the small things right, like the tension on the legs so they don't just like, flail,
Yeah.
and how do you get the angles of the legs just right? So, um, and then also the other thing we do is like, again, small thing, but something that I think is really important is the way our stoves, the carrying cases for our stoves. So we put them in a case where has like a zipper pocket on the inside, so you theoretically shouldn't lose your stove rings and your screws for your stove. And then we also have a separate carrying case for the stove pipe, so you can split up the two pieces.
Mhm.
You're hunting with a buddy, or backpack with a buddy. Like one, you can carry the stove pipe, stove body, or you can sort of pack the stove, box outside of your pack and put the stove pipe inside your pack. You've got some options for how you pack it, so it's not one big unit that you have to figure out how to attach to your backpack or put in your backpack.
So my stoves are like 16 by 10 by 10, probably. I'm just putting a number right. I'm guessing on top of my head. Do you guys make only one stove or multiple size stoves?
We have one now. We're actually coming out with a bigger one next year.
Yeah, I figure that's what I was going to ask. You just guys, we're going to get to this big tent. I feel like you must have the bigger stove coming.
We do. Yep, we absolutely do. But you'd be surprised. The size of our existing Skyline stove, which we call our medium size, it it actually heats up. I mean, it's a 15 inches long, so it does a pretty good job at like it'll heat up. You can put quite a bit of wood in there, and it puts out quite a bit of heat, so it can heat up a pretty good sized tent.
Nice. Now, so my story on the wood stove thing, I'll get to that real quick 'cause this is funny. My father-in-law drew an elk tag, 72 years old. We were hunting northern Arizona, and it was snowing, raining, and it went. We were in my canvas wall tent, my Davis wall tent, 16 by 12, giant tent. I built my own 10 gauge, which is eighth inch stainless steel stove.
Mm.
It's rad. This thing will outlive the apocalypse. It'll be forever. And it has a 6-inch pipe on the back. And I typically bring a drill and screws. I forgot to bring it. It's like, whatever, we don't need it. It's not windy, whatever. It got to the point, if you guys have ever been to, wall tent or any tent, it was like, you can hear it. The whole tent's coming in and out. You felt like at any moment this tent was going to like go like Wizard of Oz, like to the top of the mountains. It was that windy. And middle of the night, it blew my stovepipe out of the tent. It ripped it off. So now we are asphyxiated. Tent is filling with smoke. It's dark. It's like 2 a.m., whatever it is. And we ended up having to like get up and just like drag this tent or drag this stove out in the middle of the night out into the windstorm because it was like we had nothing we could do. It
Oh
was
wow.
a very
Yeah.
similar thing. The wind
Oh
is
yeah.
gnarly, man. Wind's the X factor. That's what I want to ask you about. So speaking of wind, um, I'm a big fan of Hilleberg tents.
Uh huh.
Just for like, I know when I use my Hilleberg, like I'm not going to have any issues for wind. Um, when you go to Alaska, I take it you're going to run your tent
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've used our tents quite a bit in Alaska.
on your sheep hunt. Now, how are you setting up your floorless shelter? I assume you're bringing a two-person teepee, I imagine, for this.
Yep. I'm gonna bring our 2 person tent.
So, how are you setting up on a shale, rock face, wherever you are? Are you using a bunch of rocks around it? How are you setting that thing up?
Oh yeah, good question. So like yeah, because they're not freestanding tents, is what you're saying,
No,
right?
yeah, not freestanding, and also like you. like there's some skill involved. Like when I talk to the greedy guys, there's some skill involved in pitching these things, right? And putting rocks on the bottom of them and making it to where you're not going to have. It's one of those things where it's like crap in, crap out. Like if you set it up right, you're going to be fine in a storm. If you're lazy with a Florida shelter, like you can have problems.
Yeah, and I'd say that I think that probably applies to any tent. Like you need to guy them out well. I
Mm-hmm.
actually, it's really not that complicated. We have a lot of sheep guides that use our tents. There are a couple. I won't name drop, but there's some pretty big Canadian, well-known sheep outfits in like Yukon territory that all their guides use our tents. So and I think it's not as complicated as you might think. So if you're in a place where you can't get a stake in the ground because it's just rocks, what you do is you take your stake, run it through the paracord on the guy outline, and
Mm-hmm.
lay that and lay it perpendicular is what I like to do, and just lay rocks on top of the stake. Then
Mm-hmm.
so that's one way, and then just weight it down really well with a bunch of rocks, and that thing's
Mm-hmm.
not going anywhere. Just be careful. You want to be careful not to put sharp points of the rock, like lean it up against your tent fabric, because if it gets really windy and that fabric, is whipping back and forth across the sharp point, it will tear a hole in it eventually. But that's really all I do. Or even take a stick and, a thick enough stick, and obviously in cheap country, you're probably not gonna find sticks. But I've done this before. We just run a stick through the paracord and then just use that as an anchor, essentially, to put rocks on top of. And you
That's
just
a
do
good
the,
idea.
the same way you normally would. You In our tents, they're all designed to be pitched. You pitch the four corners, so pitch a rectangle, put the pole in the middle, and then you guy out the rest of the guy out points, and it's pretty simple. Um, but yeah, and I think you're right that you have to, if you can't get a stake actually in the ground, you just have to it might take you a few more minutes to stack rocks on top of it, but you can really guy out a tent that can take some pretty heavy weather if you do that.
Yeah, it took me. I still have it, a Seek Silvertip, and
Uh-huh.
I pitched that thing wrong for probably 2 seasons before I realized it's a rectangle. So, like, I have a new tent that I'm running this year, and I've set it up 4 times now. Like, when you get a shelter, like if you go get an Argali tent, set this thing up 3, 4 times, 5 times. Like, set it up, figure out the shape of the tent, because that's really the key to getting these things. Like, if you don't get the bottom staked out correctly, it's just not going to look right when it goes up. It's going to sag. It's going to be funny. So figure out the shape. What I assume you have videos on all these tents.
We got videos. We've got videos on all of them, and yeah. So if you buy a tent from us, you're gonna get an email sent to you automatically with a video, like setup video. I'd say like half the people we buy a tent watch those videos, but
Yep.
if you watch the video, and then I think it's really sage advice. Just like set it up once or twice, at least once or twice. So the first time you're setting it up and pitching it is not in the field.
Yep.
And once you do it once or twice, you'll be like, oh, got it, super easy.
And do it right before your hunt too. Like so, like I'm doing this right now. Like you say you put this tent away for a year, do it again because you go out there and it's easy to with the Florida shelters forget how you're which way to go, which stakes to use. You don't necessarily need to use all the stakes on your guy outs. Are you just running tension knots like 6 foot of paracord with a tension knot so you can like slip it like a Boy Scout knot where you slip it to tighten, or how are you doing that?
We have line lock adjusters.
Oh, you have line lock gestures on there. Okay.
All of our guy out points have line lock adjusters on them, and then we have extra guy out points higher up around the tent, about a third of the way up, that you can use with paracord, however you like. But yeah, the line locks make it super simple and easy to adjust the tension. That's the other thing is like if you get when you pitch a tent and you need to adjust the tension on one seam or the other because it looks sloppy, you can easily do that by like tightening one, loosening the other.
Yeah, I like the line lock adjusters. I actually bought a box of them. I don't know where they went to use on my tents, and I just always end up tying that tension knot, which I think you know what I'm talking about, right? You just run a loop back
Yeah.
over itself. It's basically a slip knot. I mean, Boy Scout knot, whatever. I learned it when I was a kid and just always run that thing. It's easy. It's kind of like a trucker's hitch, but not as
Yeah.
complicated.
Yep. We have
Um,
so our line locks are just for our tents are just sewn right into the webbing on the
oh,
tent.
really?
Yeah. Mhm.
On the base, but not on the guy outs.
Not on the upper guy outs. Yeah, just along the bottom guy out points. Yeah, the upper guy out lines are we just have webbing loops that you can use to tie paracord to.
Wherever you want.
Yeah,
How important is guying out a tent?
it's so important, man. Yeah, insanely important. like
Yeah.
like don't leave your tent. It's like don't leave your tent unattended. It's like you need to guide out really well because if all, it's like, yeah, I left my tent and it was like, no wind and everything. And then all of a sudden you get like, a huge storm that comes through and you get like a 50-mile-an-hour gust. And it's like your tent could be gone if you don't guy it out properly. Right.
Yeah, I always guy out, and I actually tie my guy outs onto there before I go. So like I'm finishing up this tent right now in my yard, and it'll have guy outs all the way around it, just so I have them there.
Yeah. It's smart.
And I always have a 100 foot of paracord in my pack, no matter what. Like if you're like, what's something in your pack, no matter what, it would be like dude wipes, toilet paper, and paracord.
Yeah.
If I have those three things, I'm pretty much gonna make it.
Yeah. I think that's wise. That's sage advice.
um, Tell me about this one that's intriguing me right now with you guys. I just saw it come out. The thing did an article on Rockslide about it. People post about Rockslide.
Mhm.
You guys just came out with like a big two pole monster shelter.
Yeah. 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 I'm actually really excited about this one because, it's a 2-pole, 8-person shelter. We call it 8. You could sleep if you just put bodies on the ground and sleeping bags. You could fit 10 people in there. But we call it an 8 just because we don't we get enough people saying like, well, your 4-person is actually a 2-person with a stove, and it's like, yes, that's exactly what we say on the product page. But so we call it an 8 just to be conservative in the size. But and the reason we did that is really about usable interior space, right? So like I have used an 8-person TP for years, and I had kind of a love-hate relationship with it because it's a huge tent with a huge footprint, but down towards the bottom of the tent, in round teepee style tents, there's just a ton of lost usable
Yep,
space because the
100%.
tent gets close to the ground, it kind of bows out typically.
Mhm.
And so there's this, ring around your tent, the circumference of your tent that's basically just unusable space.
It's where you go to get wet.
It's where you go to get wet. So again, it was like, we were on a hunt and I was using a teepee, and there were 3 of us with gear in there, and it felt completely maxed out and it was crowded. And I was like, this is nuts. This tent is big. It should feel, and we're backpacking, so it should feel bigger. And so I literally drew. We had some downtime because I killed an elk, and we were sitting around camp one day, and I just in the dirt drew out the design for the 8-person, which is, if you think about the shape, it's basically a rectangle, and then on the ends of each of the rectangle, you have a hexagon, essentially. And that's really the shape of our 8-person tent, and it has 2 poles in the middle, with a 5-foot span in between the poles. So it feels like a huge tent when you walk in it. It feels like a wall tent. There's room to walk around. There's a lot of head space and interior usable space, and it creates these steep walls. So anyways, I really like it. Well, we've been working on it for a while and just finally bringing it to market. But it's a great backpacking shelter for, I'd say, like moderate backpacking trips, because it's still, I think, all in with 2 poles, 2 aluminum poles, tent, you're right around like 7 pounds. So if you split those parts and pieces up between a few guys, you could, only be carrying maybe a couple pounds a piece, a little over 2 pounds a piece. And have a huge shelter, but it's really designed to be a base camp shelter as well. So whether you're flying in somewhere, car camping, whatever.
Yeah, that's where I think it'd be nice. Like on that Frank trip I did, we just brought like our small tents, and like man, like bringing in a big shelter like that for base camp would be awesome. And it
Yeah.
does you don't get that that weight penalty where like you're limited on these hunts to like 50 pounds a person generally. They want you to be light, so like if you were to bring that tent in with you, you then could have a really big base camp only with 7 pounds. That's not that much weight at all.
Yeah.
Versus if I bring like my I have a Kodiak canvas that I pretty much switched over to completely now from my wall tent.
Mm-hmm.
But I would never be able to bring that on a backpack or like a flying hunt because the thing weighs 30 pounds, whatever it weighs. I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal tent, but it's not practical for a flying hunt.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it has, and then like, llamas, horses, obviously like packing, pack stock. I use llamas quite a bit too. Other pack stock, goats and things like that. So I think it has a whole, set of uses for hunting that I think is interesting. So
And it probably packs down a lot smaller than a canvas tent, I imagine.
very small. Yeah. We have photos on our product page about it and show you, but yeah, it's about, trying to think of, it's like the size of a watermelon, like a good sized watermelon. That's what it packs down to.
And you guys have a stove jack in that as well?
Yeah. Yep. Stove jack and liners for that tent. And that's the other thing. You'll appreciate this. The way our liners connect is different. So There are no we have there are no knots you have to tie or paracord you have to use. It's all G hooks on the liners. So like a G-shaped aluminum hook that threads into a piece of sewn-in webbing that are
Hmm.
on our tents. So there are three each seam on our tent. So if you have half insert to help with, excuse me, when I say insert, I meant liner. Sorry, we're using a lot of vernacular that people might not know. A liner is something you can put on the inside of a big tent that essentially helps with condensation management. It keeps condensation from the tent from dripping on you. And the way our liners connect is the G hooks go into some webbing that is sewn into the tent. So it's just fast and easy to connect liners.
Gotcha. And I imagine the stove you're coming out with is made for this, right? Is it not stove going to be titanium or stainless?
It's titanium. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a big titanium stove.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So you could still, put on llamas and bring it back there and have a good base camp and do that whole
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
How do you think that tent's going to hold up to like wind and stuff, to
Yeah.
like
Great question.
storms?
I've got a lot of questions about that. It has 32 guy out points on it.
Okay.
So it feels like a fortress.
When
Um,
you get it down and actually guide out right.
it's solid.
Okay.
It's really, really solid tent. The tension, I don't know how to describe it other than way to say it has 22 guy outs along the bottom, and then you have 10 additional guy out points, about a third of the way out the tent. You get all the guy outs on the bottom and the midway guy out points like guide out, and it genuinely feels very solid. I haven't, I don't think we've had it in what I would call like extreme winds, but we've had it in some pretty decent winds, and it's done really well. Um, I think for any tent, this is a good question we get a lot. Anytime you get above, 60-mile-an-hour winds, I don't care if you have a Hilleberg or any tent, like all bets are off. Um, and I also, the other thing is like, it's hard to, most people aren't carrying a measuring device to know actually how strong the winds are when you're out
Hmm.
there. So it's hard to, it's hard for, we get this question all like, what is the strongest, how much wind can your tent take? And it's like, well, it depends on like how well did you guide out,
How
um,
sustained is the wind?
how sustained is, are we talking gust sustained? But they can take a high winds, and we have customers be like, I was in 55-mile-an-hour winds and my tent was fine. And even when I hear that, I'm like, how do you know it's 55? Like, are you just guessing? Is that what was forecasted? Like, how do you really know, right? But anyway, so I'm always very conservative when I talk about that, talk about wind in our tents, but I feel very confident on the AP that it'll take wind real well, just because you can guide the thing out so well.
Is that what you're calling it, the 8P?
Yeah, 8P, the Yukon 8P.
Yukon 8P. It's a
Yeah.
good name for it. It's a really good name for it. Well, dude, we like to end with a hunting story on this podcast. Doesn't have to be your biggest animal, your craziest story. It could be your favorite animal. It could be a fun hunt, or it could be your biggest, baddest animal you ever shot. Just a campfire story, man.
Campfire story. Gosh.
Campfire story.
Um. Oh man, I don't even know which one to pick. Drew, so many, and which one would be interesting and not just totally boring. Why don't I tell this one because it's the animal I end up killing in the film that's launching here this week in this
Cool.
film Runout that we're putting out because it was a really fun story. So you just want me to tell you like how I killed the animal?
Yeah, man. Just 5 minutes, whatever.
All right,
It
I'll
doesn't
make it
be a
quick
doesn't
than
be a
that.
novel, but it's something. Just a campfire story.
Yeah, so I'll preface this by saying the whole theme for this film, Run Out, part of the film was about me trying to kill a really large mule deer with my bow. I had spent, I drew a really great tag in a western state. Um, I'm intentionally not saying the name because I get in trouble when I start mentioning state names. Well, let's just say it's a great state that has big deer. I found some very large deer in that state. Scouted, spent a lot of time scouting this deer and watching them in August. Got very close several times, but ultimately did not kill this really big buck that I was hunting. Got like 40 yards one day and 50 yards another day. Just couldn't kill it. Never got a shot off. So I left that state and I was just like frustrated. And I was like, spent a lot of points drawing this tag. Frustrated, I didn't shoot the deer, and I still had the opportunity to go up to Alberta later in the season to archery hunt mule deer. So I went up to Alberta, and at this point in time, like I had spent so much time like passing on really good deer I was starting to get this like voice in my head about like you should just shoot a nice deer, like a good deer, be happy with it, and stop being such picky hunter. But I was like, nope, I'm gonna stick to my guns. We saw some great deer in Alberta. I specifically remember this one deer that was like ended up being like just shy of 180, and we were looking at him. He was like very, very, very stalkable with a bow position. And my buddy Ryan was my guide. We were looking at him. And I was like, you know what, Ryan, I'm just not excited about that deer, man. I'm willing to walk away with nothing if that's what it takes. And we ended up finding um, later that day a really good buck and snuck in on him and got to like 55 yards, made a silly mistake. That deer blew out, and I thought, there goes my deer forever. I'd had all this frustration, like just I'm having a year, man. Don't know what's
Said
going
the
on.
state, dude.
What's that?
Said the state.
Oh, sorry. Secret's out now.
I do it every time I say I'm not going to say it. I always go back and say
I
it.
know, I know. And the next day when we were waking up, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna just be happy to hunt. If we end up finding something great, if not, I've had a lot of fun up here. We don't see anything great that morning, and I looked at Ryan and I was like, hey, you know what? Let's go back where that buck was bedded in that coulee. Let's just go check it just for fun. Maybe he's back. I doubt it. It's next day, but let's just go check it. Sure enough, man, that deer was right back in the same bed the next day. I couldn't believe it. And so then was able to sneak in on that deer and spent about, I don't know, somewhere between 3.5 and 4 hours just laying down, waiting for him to get up. Like rainstorm came. I got shivering cold. Like I was like, I don't know if I can shoot my bow right now. I'm shivering so damn bad. It was so cold. Anyways, ended up shooting him. It all worked out. Great mule deer. Super happy with it. Full story will be in this film we're coming out with here on the 13th.
Awesome. That'll be after this. What did that buck end up going?
He was like mid 180s.
Okay. Just a cool buck.
But like a typical, like he's just a beautiful buck, like no extras, just a typical 4, and just super
That's awesome.
cool. Like, not the biggest deer I've killed, but it's a great deer. And I was happy with him just after all the struggles I'd had that last year.
That's awesome, man. Well, that was a good pod, dude. Where can we find Argali? Plug your stuff.
Yeah, like social media, Instagram, Argali official, YouTube, Argali, website, argalioutdoors.com.
Awesome. Well, Brad Brooks, I'm excited for you guys. I'm rooting for you guys, and let's do it again, man.
Sounds good. Nice to meet you, Drew. Thanks for having me on.